Right after that, I started working through Lenny. He got me, he had produced an album on Vanessa Paradis, who was a French pop star, a huge star in France. And Lenny had produced a record, and Lenny was putting the band together for her for like a European tour. Vanessa's now married to Johnny Depp, but in France she was a supermodel, rock star actress. She had all of it happening. And I thought, well, this would be a great tour. And Lenny asked me if I would do it, you know, for him, and I said, yeah, I'd love to. And so I began to work with her all around the world. And so by the time Lenny was ready to go on the road again, I was under contract with Vanessa, and I couldn't get out of the tour because it was in the middle of it. So then I had to not go back to join Lenny. And so, but I stayed with Vanessa, and no regrets, because Vanessa was awesome. Of course, I missed Lenny terribly in the music, but I felt like I made that decision. I'm going to stand by my word. You know, some people leave things in the middle of it, but I wasn't that type of guy. I wanted to honor what I said. And Lenny was disappointed, and I was disappointed that the timing didn't work out. But you know, we were still going to be friends. Then after that, I worked with Jody Watson, who was a big American pop rhythm and blues star. So that was directly right after Vanessa Paradis, and then I did that for, I don't know, a year and a half or two, and then I got a chance to work with Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons, and that was an awesome gig because it was different. All of the different gigs that I had done through the years were all different completely from one another. Lenny was completely different than Bobby Brown, and Vanessa was completely different than Lenny, and Frankie Valli was different. They're all very different styles of music. And I was a big Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons fan, because one of the very first songs I ever learned to play on the drums ever was that song Grease, you know, from the movie Grease. And it was produced by the Bee Gees, and it had this funky drum breakdown. And I remember in high school going to see the movie like 25 times, and I just dug the soundtrack and the vibe. And I thought, man, how cool would it be to play with that guy? That was the guy I really, you know, loved all his pop tunes, you know. He had like 60 charted pop hits. And so I really felt like God telling me that that was the gig that he had for me. And so I auditioned for it, and as fate would have it, I had favor, and I got the gig. And that really set me up very well at that time in my life, because Frankie was the first gig that I did that was a steady gig, but you didn't have to be on tour for like 11 months out of the year. He worked, he did maybe 15, 20 weeks out of the year intermittently all over the world, so I could have a bit of a life and not have to be gone the whole time. And I was just newly married, and during the time I was with Frankie is when I was writing my book, The Commandments of R&B Drumming, and when I developed all the educator side of me, because I'd always wanted to teach and write. So on all those gigs with Frankie, you know, I made a nice yearly salary, so I didn't have to go scrambling from gig to gig. I could concentrate on what I would do with all that extra spare time. So I stayed with Frankie for a number of years, and during that time is when I developed myself as a clinician, as an educator, and as an author. And it took me several years to write my book, about 5 years or so of time that I put in writing The Commandments of R&B Drumming. And at the time when I was just leaving Frankie, is when my ship was coming for all of my educational stuff. So when my stint with him was done, then all the doors had opened for me to do clinics and educational things and festivals around the world as an educator, because the time that he allowed me to write and do all that stuff, because when you're on a long tour like I was with Lenny and Vanessa, there's no time to work on anything else. You're so busy doing that gig that there's hardly any downtime. But with Frankie, I knew where I was making my money, so I used my time judiciously and wisely to develop these other ambitions and dreams that I had, that visions that God had given me and dreams God placed in my heart. And I said, this is the time to do that. So in looking back, it was so the hand of God on my life, because it allowed me to develop these other things that were dying to come out of me.